Hi, and a very good morning to everyone here, Mr. Ng, Miss Aisha, and Miss Farisha. Welcome to our group discussion for BMMU 4053, which we will discuss about OSHA in details regarding its legal requirement and its foundation. As future engineering technologies, we must understand that our profession isn't just about design, it's about safety and welfare. We are bound by the Factories and Machinery Act, FMA 1967, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which is OSHA 1994. Now, let's open the floor. Why did Malaysia shift from the prescriptive FMA to the more inclusive OSHA? May I ask you, Mr. Ng?
Actually, that's a great starting point because the FMA 1967 was technically a very top-down act. So it basically focuses heavily on the safety of machinery and specific factory environment, hence the name of uh, factories and machinery. However, because it only focuses on like machinery, it only protected a certain small fraction of the workforce. Basically, it only focuses on those workforce who's have machinery included. So what about those without the machinery? What happened to them? Is there any act that will help to keep their welfare safe, like you mentioned before? Hence why the FMA 1967 has been abolished, and now the new OSHA 1994 has included a new rule, sort of. Basically, it changed the game by shifting the focus towards the person rather than just the machinery itself. I think that's like a very good starting point in which we can help to protect the welfare of like us engineers or technicians. So basically, the OSHA 1994 it covers almost all economic sectors at this point. It ensures like whether you are in a high tech lab or an office that does not have machinery, you are protected by the FMA 1967. It was a highly prescriptive and almost focuses entirely on machinery. So this kind of factory registration doesn't protect every workforce. And like statistically, it only protects 24% of the workforce, leaving many sector like service sector or finance basically unregulated. So the OSHA 1994 also introduced a new act or regulation called self-regulation, meaning the responsibility will be shifted from the government to those who created the risk and work with the risk.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ng, for the beautiful explanation of FMA and OSHA. Well, first of all, what is FMA exactly? It is a Factories and Machinery Act, which we made it in 1967. The FMA was the primary legislation before the OSHA 1994 amendment and served as the technical backbone of safety in the workplace. It focusing in primarily in prescriptive and technical, focusing on the registration and inspection of the machinery in any industry or factory, especially factories and machinery, and the physical condition of factories. Meanwhile, the scope only covers specific sectors, especially the industrial or the high risk sector, which is manufacturing, mining, quarrying, and especially construction, which accounted for only about, like Mr. Said before, only 24% of the Malaysian workforce, which is not even a quarter of the Malaysian workforce. So how did they approach it? Is rely heavily on government enforcement, which is, as we all know, DOSH, Government Enforcement and Physical Inspection by the Department of Occupational Safety and Health, which that is DOSH. And its current status now has been repealed to remove duplication. And its technical standards, for example, like steam boiler inspection and so on, are now regulation under the unified OSHA. So basically, OSHA is taking over of the FMA. Like it become the main legislation and regulation that the engineers or the industry need to follow for now, as for now, the 1994 one. So
True.
how about you, Mr. Ng? Can you explain more about, like, how about the 1994 Occupational Safety and Health Act, which is OSHA? How about you explain more
Yes,
about it? Thank you very much.
yes, most certainly. Like you mentioned before, basically DOSH, Department of Occupational Safety and Health, they enforce the rule where right now physical inspection is important. As we learn, every machinery or everything you need to do maintenance, predictive maintenance, or preventive maintenance. So right now it's a mandatory to fix the machine or to at least maintain the condition of your machine as per DOSH. Basically, under the Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994, they introduced a philosophy, basically, a philosophy of self-regulation. Basically, what this happens is that this effectively shift the burden of safety from the government to the workplace itself. Basically, it reduced the responsibility of the government, and now they are regulating or they change their responsibility instead of blaming everything on the government itself. Now the burden is on the workplace itself. So if the workplace provided a certain machinery, and they should always provide training, regulations, maintenance, and they will always need to have money for maintenance. If they were caught, say they were caught by DOSH, due to workers' injuries, and the excuse that they gave off is that we do not have money for machine maintenance. Hence why the machine randomly broke down and injured one of our workers. They will now be legally fined because of this new OSHA amendment. So about the self-regulation philosophy, it's basically a philosophy that is based on those who created the risk, like I mentioned before. Whoever is the holder of the machine or the risk creator, in this case, employee, and those who work with the risk are basically responsible for the safety. It's basically saying you, if you're working for this machine, then you're responsible for your own safety. You need to take care of your own safety. You need to prepare all the PPE and stuff. So this new scope originally covers around 90% of the workers. But the new 2022 amendments now extend it to reach all place of work in Malaysia, basically. Like Mr. Rashtan mentioned before. Now it includes public sector, remote work, or even work from home arrangement. Okay, so to simplify, the FMA, Factory Machinery Act 1964, which has been repealed, versus the OSHA 1994, the current OSHA, the philosophy of FMA is basically government enforcement. Now they have been changed to self-regulation instead. While the primary focus of the FMA 1967 focuses only on machinery and factory parts. Now the OSHA 1994 focuses on people and the system of the working conditions. So the shift of the scope changed from manufacturing and construction, which covers around 24%, to an all economic sectors. Now it covers all workplace and sectors. And the old Factory Machinery Act also has very low tax penalty. Now the new OSHA basically mandates safety so much that if you are fined for, you may be fined for 500,000 ringgit Malaysian or 2 years in jail. This is how serious the government prioritize the safety of the workers in Malaysia.
Yeah, I exactly. I actually agree with your opinion, Mr. And I think it's also very important to touch on the 2022 amendment to OSHA because they really changed how we look at workplace safety. Am I right?
Yes, correct.
And yes, and with the Factory and Machinery Act being repealed, everything that related to machinery and technical work is now under one law, which is OSHA. And for us as technology, that actually make things simpler. We no longer juggling different acts, and the law now reflects how we actually work today, whether that on site, offsite, or even like I said, even at remote projects. And there are a few key changes that worth mentioning. One is the idea of the imminent danger. Employee now has the right to step away from a task if they genuinely think it's not safe. And the next one is there also Another big one is the requirement for OSH coordinator. Even for example, that even a smaller company, I think, need someone trained to handle safety matters. Like everyone has to be trained, which also can help to make sure OSH is just afterthought. And finally, I think, in my opinion, the penalties, the fines are much higher now. Am I right? It's what
Yes.
Mr. Ng said, 500,000, right? And the director can be held personally responsible. So overall, I think it sends a clear message that safety is just a taboo and it's something that has to be taken seriously at every level. That's all. That's all. I think.
Okay, thank
So
you for Mr. Ng and Miss Aisha for explaining,
Explaining.
and comparing between the FMA 1967 and OSHA 1994 on why they changed it and why have it repealed and now being using 1994 OSHA Act. So, Mr. Ng, I realized something. You often mention self-regulation. Can you elaborate more on the salient features of OSHA that define this philosophy? That's this self-regulation. What is the meaning of that?
Okay, so as we all know, the heart of OSHA right now, as of the current state, is that those who create the risk must manage them. You are responsible for what you do. So, as an employer, under the Section 15, the employer basically has a general duty to ensure, as far as practical wise, the safety, the health of all employers, the welfare has to be kept. They have to take care of all of these requirements. So this isn't just like a suggestion, it's basically a legal mandate to provide training, basically, to train all the technicians, engineer on how to use a certain machine, what technique to use, give them trainings, give them PPE, basically, and then all the safe system for works, even creating all the procedures. What are the SOPs for using this machine? Certain machines require specific SOP. If you breach the SOP, then something bad might happen. So all of this basically is, at the end of the day, just trying to create a safe environment. Because if you want to compare, you have to pay 50,000 Malaysian ringgit. Now you have to pay 500,000. There's no way. There's no way all these employees are gonna pay that much. So it's better to just follow all these newer rules that emphasize on the safety of workers.
Besides, I agree with Mr. And besides, let's not forget about Section 24, which outlines the duty of the employee. It states that safety isn't just the boss job, and we as a worker must cooperate with the employer and wear our PPE during the our work. And if we don't, we are also legally liable, which is partnership.
yeah, I think I agree with Ms. Faisha, and building on that, a major salient feature is the right to remove oneself for imminent danger. So yeah, we do have to wear our PPE, and if a technology sees a structural risk or chemical leak that possess an imminent threat, they need to do a legal backing to stop the work without fear or unfair dismissal. This is a massive shift here to employee empowerment. And if they have a justifiable suspicion of serious risk and their employer fails to act, they need to take a legal action lah, I think.
What if, imagine, what if the PPE that they wear actually is broken? How do you think like all these employers should act? Do you think it's
Mm, I think they
Well,
need to go for it. Yes, that's
oh, sorry. Well, as for me, the employer main responsibility in terms of the PPE
yes, I
equipment,
agree.
like they they must give and
Provide.
provide, yes,
Uh,
the safest PPE they can provide. As that is their main responsibility. So if there is no reason, there is no excuse for any employer to provide the workers with a cheap, brand old, or a broken equipment, because that's their responsibility. So as for me, if it happened to have that to happen in any in any industry, it shows that the employer are not that serious taking the 1994 OSHA Act. So
I
it's
do
my
agree for
opinion.
that because there are some times where I feel like to save budget, so they purposely would just reuse all these old PPE, old
Exactly.
goggles, old helmets, broken down PPE shoes. So I still feel like as an employer, you should always renew or have like a spare equipment just for the sake of if it's broken down, we can instantly change a new one. I think that's kind
Yeah,
of
I,
cool.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree
I
with
agree.
that, because not all employer doing their work properly, right? So
Yep.
Yeah.
we just to save
You never
ourselves,
know.
we must provide ourselves first. We must
Yeah,
prioritize
even
ourselves
if
first.
even if the employers don't provide you PPE, I think as a worker, you should find a PPE yourself just in case something bad happens.
Yes, that's true. So how about we move on to the business side? As we all know, many managers sees OSHA as a cost center. So how do these legal requirements actually function as a management tools for any factories or any industry? The role of OSH legislation has evolved from being a simple rule book to a more strategic business management tool. As as we know, workforce stability in a safe environment, which can improve employees' moral and productivity, which is the most important part for every company, the productivity, while reducing absenteeism due to injury, which can reduce the absence of workers due to the injuries that happen uh, on the workplace because they doesn't comply with the 1994 Act. So, what is your opinion about this, Ms. Farisha?
So in my opinion, actually, OSH is not OSH is like a business investment because when a company comply with OSH regulation, right, they will performing risk management. Think about the cost minimization, which is one of major accident that thing can result in a stop work order, which will halt the production and cost a million of cost like that. And by the following of law, we can protect the company bottom line, which which is the organizational reputation and ESG. And when a company complying with the OSH law, it is now a key part of environmental, social, and governance ESG goal. It also will enhance the company image with investor and client.
Okay, so it is also sort of like a legal liability as of now, as this legal liability is like a huge factor. Under the new laws, directors, managers can be held jointly and severely liable. So this means that the leadership can't just blame a floor supervisor for a breach happening because the fines will reach up to 500,000. So the OSH now is like a broad room priority. It's not just a floor level concern now. So regarding the cost minimization, well, the compliance requires initial investments, which might be costly. What it does happen is that it will save the business money in the long run. Basically, it will reduce the insurance premiums, medical compensation, and all the legal fines that could potentially reach up to 500,000, which would be like a huge loss and sometimes could lead to bankruptcy. So the corporate liability right now under the new 2022 amendments, the directors and managers can be held personally liable for safety breach, basically making OSHA top priority item for the board of directors.
Yeah, I agree with your point, Mr. Ng and Ms. Farisha. But I would like to add that to OSH compliance that use HIRAC, which is hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control. This is the core of management process. For example, by identifying the hazard early, we can prevent that hazard and ensure the business to operate smoothly. And it's about the operational excellency and not just checking the box. All right. And the risk management and continuity, which is take a legal requirement mandate formal risk assessment like highlight by using I, I mean by helping business identify and mitigate the hazard before they lead to the costly operational shutdown. That's all.
I see. So thank you for all the speakers for the excellent explanation. So now we move on in real life studies. Like, what are the examples of real life cases studies that actually happen due to the negligence of these acts of this responsibility? How about we start with Mr. Ng? Can you explain any case study that you know that happened because of this negligence? Thank you.
There is actually a lot of case studies actually related to this kind of like OSHA breaching or maybe negligence. So I will start. So there is a industrial explosion case basically happening in Johor related to chemical manufacturing. So this is a classic example of a failure in Section 15 and the role of OSHA in management. So this particular incident happens in Johor. Basically, an explosion occurred at a factory during the maintenance work when welding sparks ignited a raw methanol gas. What happened? Consequences of this happening is that it killed 3 people. So under the business management failure, the hot work permit, basically the company failed to issue a hot work permit and a standard management control to ensure no welding happens near flammable gas. So this basically is a communication failure, is what we call it. The management did not provide the safety data sheet (SDS) to the contractors, so they were unaware of the methanol hazard. Basically, this forum application mandates that we could use this to show that OSH is a risk management tool. Basically, if the management had just followed the permit to work system, providing the hot work permit, they would have avoided the total production shutdown and they would have avoided killing 3 people, innocent people. And this basically leads to their reputation being tarnished. Imagine this, not having a work permit that eventually leads to people not knowing there is gas, methanol gas nearby. So the maintenance work just happens due to them not knowing the hazard of working there. These are the case example of industrial explosion in Johor.
Well, I would like to add regarding case study, because I know there's one incident which is there is a crane falling in Kapit Sarawak, which is a construction site. But the incidents explained that the construction firm has been fined with 25,000 ringgit under the Section 15 because a worker was killed in the accident when a crawler crane he was operating fell into a river. So the department investigated and found out that the company failed to ensure a safe working environment and safe equipment maintenance, which is they doesn't maintain their crane at all, especially because they want to cut costs. But so if we look at the 2022 amendment, the increased penalty, well, it's kind of unfair, right? Like the cost of one life actually just 25,000 ringgit. Like that for a big company, it's just a mild annoyance, right? It's a mild disturbance of 25,000. So if you see that if you follow the 2022 amendment right now, the company will get a much heavier penalties. Well, this case resulted in a 25,000 fine under the new law. Effectively, last year, June, a similar failure could cost the company up to 500,000, which is a lot. I mean, fair for a cost of one person, like it's someone's family and friends, right? To cost about
True.
500,000 from 20 as for 25,000, I think that's not fair. So I think the
That's
2022
why.
amendment, yeah, is much more. It need to be complied, need to be applied like to nowadays company. It's much fair for me, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that. Safety first.
That's
Draw.
okay.
So Farisha or Aisha, how about Farisha? Can you state any case study that you know?
So there's a case where for high-rise implementation in Malaysia SME. And in this case, a study on a small Malaysian manufacturing firm had shown that by implementing the HIRAC, which is hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control, across their production line, which is, for example, mixer, extruder, and also dryer department. We allow them to categorize hazard into high level, medium level, or even low risk. And in this case, by using the hierarchy of control, the business will move from using only PPE, which is the weakest control that can be implemented, to the engineering control like machine guarding, which significantly reduce the accident rate that might happen at the workplace and also insurance costs. And this also explains the philosophy of self-regulation, which is instead of waiting for Dodge inspector, the company can take responsibility for its own risk. How about Miss Aisha?
Yes, I also like to share a real case that yes, I also like to share a real case that really ties everything together. For example, there was a ammonia gas incident in Kuala Lumpur where a worker actually lost his life during a gas transfer process. Because the cylinder involved was over 20 years old and hadn't been properly inspected. What stand out more is that there wasn't just a technical failure. The company itself didn't carry out the periodic inspection and testing, which is a basic requirement in industrial maintenance. And this case actually reflects the shift that we have been discussing, which is FMA 1967 to OSHA 1994. And under the FMA, the focus was largely on the condition of the machinery itself. But under OSHA, the focus is much broader, broad. It's much broad. It look at the maintenance system, safe procedure, and whether the worker are completely trained to recognize when equipment is no longer safe to use. So this incident reminds us that modern OSH isn't just about machines, it's about systems, people, and responsibility. And when any of these fail, the consequences can be fatal. And with that, I will hand it back it to the main Mr. Rashton. And I hope this discussion encourage us to take off requirement for more seriously in our field.
So thank you for the explanation from our speakers. We are nearing our 30 minutes limit, or we already breached it, but we just
So
move
good.
on. Let's let's summarize the outcomes from our discussion. So how about we start with Miss Aisha again? Uh, can you summarize the outcome for today discussion? Thank you.
So I think our first outcome is that ours is the legal requirement move a business from reactive culture that can fix things after someone get hurt to a proactive culture. It's essential for any engineering technologies to understand. Don't you guys agree?
Um, so I really agree with Ms. Aisha. And for me, another outcome is being a responsible technologies. That means being public safety and environmental cautious. Our role is to bridge the gap between technical engineering and also human safety. How about Ms.
Finally, I also think we should highlight that OSH now is for everyone, human-centered now. Even small firms with 5 or more employees must have an OSH coordinator. Safety is no longer optional like it used to be for small business. It's a mandatory nowadays.
Yeah, like it's much better now than they were using FMA 1967. I think that's all for today. Thank you everyone. We have covered the evolution of the acts, the salient features like section 50 and 24 earlier, and the strategic role of OSH in business management. So thank you everyone. And yeah, we dismiss our meeting for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.